Hello DTC all, happy Christmas season. Now let's get started with this podcast about health literacy. The first paper from the suggested reading list is Defining and Measuring Health Literacy. How can we profit from other literacy domains? By Schulz, Diviani, Camerini, and Frisk. Apologies for my problems pronouncing these names. The other paper is Teaching Critical Health Literacy as a Means to Action on the Social Determinants of Health by DeVault, Good, and Mockford. In this podcast, I'm going to summarize the major arguments in each paper, making comparisons where appropriate, with regard to the major frameworks learned in the course. Now let's get started with the first paper. The first paper is of a three-tier structure. First of all, giving definitions of health literacy, HL thereafter, and then going on discussing measures of HL, before taking a final look at other literacy domains to explore a relationship with HL. Now let me break down each of the three tiers to a greater depth, starting with the definitions. HL was first termed in 1974 in a health education conference, but till now, when asked to give an explicit definition of HL, people still haven't reached a final agreement. In a more traditional or original sense, as the paper puts it, HL refers to reading, writing, and numeracy skills in the health environment, which to be more specific means the capability to read and understand prescription bottles, appointment slips, and other essential health-related materials. However, the real research interests in HL are reflected in its broader definition as the cognitive and social skills which determine the motivation and ability of individuals to gain access to, understand, and use information in ways which promote and maintain good health. What I find most interesting is not the definitions given above, but one by Professor Don Nutbeam. His approach to the definition identifies the multidimensionality of HL. There are three types, namely functional health literacy, interactive health literacy, and critical health literacy. To this point, I think his notion of HL shares a common thread of understanding with the categorization of literacies by Kieron Egan in 1990. With Egan, conventional literacy means basic reading and writing skills to code and decode texts. As Nutbeam says it, functional health literacy is conventional literacy placed in a healthcare context, referring to all those basic skills for a better understanding and use of health information. In terms of emergent literacy by Egan, it emerges through our interaction with our learning environment, whereas interaction with healthcare providers to apply information to changing circumstances is what is meant by interactive health literacy, according to Nutbeam. In light of Paulo Freire, Egan elevates his last model, the critical literacy, beyond the acquisition or mastery of skills, and indeed defines it as something that enables a person to take greater control over his life. Similarly, critical health literacy in Nutbeam's point of view is more advanced cognitive skills to critically analyze health information to exert greater control over one's life. As we can see here, taking greater control over one's life, whether being in the case of Egan or in the health environment of Nutbeam, is leading to greater autonomy and personal empowerment. Given in the first paper are other definitions, like the three-tier concept by Schulz and Nakamoto in 2005, or the 6 skills by Jordan et al., who stand in the patient perspective. I'm not going to talk about this in greater length, as time is rather limited. To sum up here for the first part of the paper, health literacy goes further than functional literacy in the health domain, but no consensus has been reached upon what to include in the concept holistically. Moving to the second part of the paper, the measures of health literacy. 2 most popular methods are introduced. The problem is that both tests fail to go beyond measuring functional health literacy. But there do exist measures that assess beyond functional health literacy. They're carried out in the way of knowledge tests and screening questions, but a lack of generalizability and external validity hinders both approaches from being the perfect measures of assessment of more advanced skills. The last part of the paper looks at other literacy subsets in order to research on two questions. To answer the first question, a wide range of literacy domains are selected and listed. Frick et al. Go on analyzing the dimensions derived from the literacy domains and come to a conclusion that literacies are seven-dimensional. They are not all dimensions are revealed in every kind of literacy except for the first three, but the research effort suggests that literacies of various kinds are intertwined, thus sharing similarities or common characteristics, or here in this paper, dimensions. This is why learning about one kind of literacy would to some extent benefit another type. However, it should also be noted that one kind literate person might not be literate in another kind. I think this answers the second question raised in the research. Now let's come to the second paper, Teaching Critical Health Literacy as a Means to Action on the Social Determinants of Health by Mockford et al. I think this paper is particularly interesting because the notion of critical health literacy here is concisely based on the third level of HL by Nutbeam, which I just introduced in the first paper. This level of HL addresses the point that HL education should not only be limited to basic literacy skills. It should incorporate the empowerment of individuals and communities to take action on social determinants. I think this level goes in line with the seventh phase of information literacy by Christian Bruce, where IL learning is experienced as using information for the benefit of society as a whole. Also, teaching critical health literacy this way is consistent with the social impact frame by Bruce, where a social reform orientation is emphasized. What should be noted also is that this paper introduces practical strategies to teaching critical health literacy, but improving HL is not the most crucial aim of this teaching. The ultimate teaching outcome is to raise awareness of taking actions on the social determinants of health, known as SDOH thereafter, to achieve health equity. Because Mockford et al. Believe critical health literacy is a precondition for taking individual and community action for health. This HL education uses the critical health literacy framework of Just Health Action, which, established in 2004, aimed at developing and teaching a critical health literacy curriculum. The teaching consists of 4 parts, which are: now I'm going to analyze each of them in more depth. The knowledge session, as the foundation from which individuals become critically health literate, centers on teaching SDOH. Speaking briefly, in this part, first of all, students are given didactic teaching on SDOH concepts. Going back to the 6 frames of Bruce, this teaching approach falls well into the content frame, with a focus of a discipline orientation. This session goes on putting forward progressive topics to students like what is health equity, and so forth. and asking them to map their health information landscape through readings and discussions. By the end, students can come to the realization that health is not just about healthcare, but has a socially broader sense. Moving to the second session, a good range of activities are undertaken to help students find their individual sense of direction as change agents. This session is to motivate students to advocate for health equity in a manner that suits their individual lifestyle and skill set. To be more specific, this session first introduces students to Advocacy Continuum, designed to teach students to take action at the activist level. Students then draw their personal advocacy map, by studying which they find out where their passion lies with regard to health-related issues. After this, a plan is designed, followed by an action proposal. What's more, in this session, there are activities helping students stay motivated and inspired in their advocacy efforts. At the end of the compass section, students have learned several techniques with their advocacy plans and are kept motivated. Considering 6 frames here, this compass session generally applies to 2 frames here: the constructivist learning to learn frame and the personal relevance frame, that is experiential oriented. Next session is the GHA framework skills. It refers to teaching the skills needed to take action on SDOH. This session covers 3 units: an action letter workshop on persuasive writing, an introduction to ORID facilitation technique, which stands for objective, reflective, interpretative, and decisional, and dissemination of knowledge. The last session is action. This is for students to develop and implement a SDOH action. Taking an overall look at 4 sessions taught in accordance with the GHA framework, I think what is missing from Bruce's phenomenographic 6 frames is the relational frame. Although I don't relate this paper to the competency frame, this frame obviously applies in every teaching context, so there's no need to highlight it. In terms of the final measurement of whether students' critical health literacy really gets improved or not, just like what's argued in the first paper, there are no golden measures for critical health literacy. Therefore, Mockford et al. Measure it by looking at the changes along 4 aspects. I think Mockford here is taking a behaviorism perspective to measure students' critical health literacy. To conclude, both papers look at health literacy. The first paper defines health literacy and discusses its measurements, whereas the other paper sheds light on how to teach critical health literacy for a socially significant purpose. From the 2 papers, I have learned that there are many connections bridging literacy, health literacy, and information literacy. Therefore, the study of a certain subset of literacies can draw tremendously from other literacy studies. Also, I have learned some practical teaching approaches to health literacy. But I'm sure the core ideas like mapping, reflective practice, and the 6 frames that underlie these approaches can also be employed in teaching literacies of other contexts. That's the end of this podcast. Thank you. And Merry Christmas.